Some people don't disappear suddenly. They don't ghost you with dramatic finality or announce their departure with anger or conflict. Instead, they simply stop reaching out. The text messages become less frequent. The phone calls stop coming. The invitations dry up. And before you fully realize what's happening, someone who was once a consistent presence in your life has quietly faded into the background. Psychology says this behavior is rarely random. It's not usually about a single incident or a momentary mood. Instead, it's the result of quiet mental changes that happen beneath the surface. Shifts in thinking, feeling, and relating that accumulate over time until silence becomes the natural response. Understanding why people stop reaching out isn't just about them. It's about recognizing patterns in human connection, emotional self-preservation, and the subtle ways relationships evolve or dissolve. Today, we're going to explore the 6 psychological reasons why people stop initiating contact. These aren't excuses or justifications. They're explanations rooted in how the human mind processes relationships, effort, and emotional safety. Let's dive deep into the psychology of silent withdrawal. 1. Effort imbalance. The first and perhaps most common reason people stop reaching out is effort imbalance. When one person is always the one texting first, always the one calling, always the one suggesting plans, the brain notices this unequal distribution of effort. And the human mind is extraordinarily sensitive to fairness, especially in relationships. Psychology shows that humans have a deep-rooted need for reciprocity. We're wired to notice when we're giving more than we're receiving, whether that's in material exchanges, emotional support, or simple social effort. In the beginning, you might not mind being the one who reaches out. You care about the person, you enjoy the connection, and initiating contact feels natural. But over time, something shifts. Initiating contact starts to feel like work instead of genuine connection. Each unanswered text, each conversation you have to start, each plan you have to make begins to chip away at your motivation. Your brain starts asking questions. Why am I always the one reaching out? Do they actually want to talk to me? Would they ever contact me if I stopped trying? These aren't paranoid thoughts. They're natural responses to observed patterns. And eventually, stopping outreach becomes a way to restore emotional balance. It's not about punishing the other person or being petty. It's about conserving energy and protecting yourself from the growing sense that you care more about maintaining the relationship than they do. The psychological principle at work here is called equity theory. When we perceive a relationship as imbalanced, we naturally try to restore equilibrium. Sometimes that means confronting the issue directly, but more often, especially in casual friendships or distant relationships, it means simply pulling back to match the other person's level of effort. 2. Emotional self-protection. The second major reason people stop reaching out is emotional self-protection. This is deeply tied to something psychologists call protective withdrawal, a defensive mechanism where the mind chooses silence as a way to avoid anticipated pain. Here's how it works. Imagine you regularly reach out to someone, but their responses are consistently low effort. They reply hours or days later. Their messages are brief and lack enthusiasm. They rarely ask questions or show genuine interest in your life. Or worse, sometimes they don't respond at all. Each of these small interactions registers in your brain as a micro-rejection. Individually, they might seem insignificant, but repeated over time, they train your brain to associate reaching out to this person with disappointment and emotional discomfort. Your nervous system starts anticipating rejection before it even happens. Psychology shows that humans are highly motivated to avoid emotional pain, sometimes even more than we're motivated to seek pleasure. When the brain predicts that reaching out will likely result in feeling ignored, dismissed, or unimportant, it naturally steers you away from that behavior. Stopping contact isn't about giving up on the person, it's about giving up on the painful pattern. This protective mechanism often happens below conscious awareness. You might not sit down and decide, I'm going to stop texting this person because they hurt my feelings. Instead, you just gradually lose the impulse to reach out. The thought of contacting them stops occurring to you naturally. And when it does occur to you, there's a subtle resistance, a heaviness that wasn't there before. Protective withdrawal is particularly common in relationships where there's a history of emotional inconsistency, where someone is warm and engaged sometimes, but distant and unavailable other times. This unpredictability creates anxiety, and the brain's solution is often to choose the predictable safety of silence over the unpredictable pain of engagement. 3. Silent observation. The third reason people stop reaching out is what psychologists call information-seeking behavior, though most people experience it as silent observation. This happens when someone deliberately stops initiating contact to see what happens without them. This isn't manipulation, though it can sometimes be misunderstood that way. It's actually a form of gathering information about the true nature of a relationship. People want to know, does this person actually value our connection? Would they notice if I stopped reaching out? Would they ever contact me on their own? Psychology explains this as a natural attempt to assess relationship investment. When you've been carrying most of the communication burden, You genuinely don't know if the other person values the relationship or is just passively accepting your efforts. Stepping back and creating space allows reality to reveal itself. The silence becomes a test, but not a malicious one. It's more like removing artificial support to see if something can stand on its own. If the other person notices your absence and reaches out, that provides valuable information. They do care, they do notice, and they are capable of initiating contact. If they don't reach out, that also provides information, albeit more painful information. This behavioral pattern is particularly common in relationships where someone suspects they're more invested than the other person but doesn't want to directly confront the issue. The silence creates a natural experiment that provides clarity without the vulnerability of asking, "Do you actually care about me?" 4. Mental overload. The fourth reason people stop reaching out is simpler but no less powerful: mental overload. When stress increases in someone's life, whether from work pressure, personal challenges, health issues, or emotional difficulties, the brain automatically tries to simplify. Psychology shows that under cognitive load, people naturally reduce non-essential activities to preserve mental energy. And unfortunately, social communication often falls into the non-essential category, even when it involves people we genuinely care about. This isn't personal. It's a survival mechanism. When your brain is already maxed out managing difficult situations, maintaining social relationships requires energy you simply don't have. The mental effort of composing messages, scheduling calls, and engaging in conversations, activities that felt effortless when you had cognitive space, suddenly feel exhausting. Research on cognitive resources shows that we have a limited pool of mental energy each day. When that energy is consumed by urgent problems, chronic stress, or emotional processing, there's little left for relationship maintenance. People in this state aren't choosing to neglect relationships, they're in triage mode, focusing on immediate survival and functioning. The unfortunate reality is that the people going through the hardest times are often the ones who go silent, precisely when they might need connection most. But reaching out requires vulnerability and energy they don't currently have. 5. Growing self-worth. The fifth reason people stop reaching out is actually a positive development: growing self-worth. As people develop stronger internal self-worth and self-validation, their need for constant external contact and reassurance naturally decreases. Psychology shows that individuals who validate themselves internally don't chase attention or approval from others. They're comfortable with periods of solitude. They don't need constant communication to feel valued or connected. Their sense of worth comes from within rather than from external confirmation. When someone stops reaching out due to growing self-worth, it's not because they care less about others. It's because they no longer need reassurance that they're valued, important, or worth other people's time. They've internalized their own value, which paradoxically makes them less dependent on relationship maintenance behaviors. This shift often confuses people on the receiving end. They wonder, why did they change? Don't they care anymore? But the truth is, the person hasn't become cold or uncaring. They've simply become more secure. They can let relationships exist without constant tending, trusting that genuine connections don't require constant proof. 6. Emotional detachment. The sixth and final reason people stop reaching out is emotional detachment. This is perhaps the most significant because it represents a fundamental shift in how someone feels about the relationship. Detachment doesn't happen overnight. It's a gradual process. First, people stop sharing deeply. They keep conversations surface level, protecting their inner thoughts and feelings. Then they stop initiating contact, waiting to see if the other person will reach out instead. Finally, they stop expecting anything from the relationship at all. By the time the silence becomes obvious and noticeable, the emotional connection has already weakened internally. The person has already processed their disappointment, accepted the reality of the relationship's limitations, and mentally moved on. The external silence is just the final manifestation of an internal shift that's been happening for a while. Psychology describes this as emotional disengagement, a protective process where people withdraw their emotional investment from relationships that aren't meeting their needs. It's not usually a conscious decision. It's more like a gradual cooling, where feelings that once ran warm slowly fade to neutral. Final message. So when someone stops reaching out, it's not always rejection. It's not always about you specifically, and it's not always permanent. Sometimes it's about effort imbalance, emotional self-protection, information gathering, mental overload, growing self-worth, or emotional detachment.